So here is my world exclusive Jacob Rees-Mogg revealing his support for a second referendum on the utterly irresistible logic that you can't possibly have voted for whatever it is the government come up with, given that 2 years after the vote we still don't know whatever it is that the government is going to come up with.
You could have two referendums, and as it happens it may be more sense to have the second referendum after the renegotiation is completed.
I'm going to play that again because it's a thing of absolute beauty. If ever you needed the little thread to pull from which the entire facade of Jacob Rees-Mogg's fraudulent Brexit support can be unravelled, 'tis this.
You could have two referendums, and as it happens it may be more sense to have the second referendum after the renegotiation is completed.
Jacob Rees-Mogg there coming out for the so-called People's Vote, allying himself with the likes of David Lammy, Chuka Umunna and sundry other people, Gary Lineker, sundry other people who generally have the interests of the nation at heart rather than simply the interests of a bank balance or a peculiar 19th century view of Britain. Here's David Davis in 2012. I haven't found the footage, unfortunately. Is that before they started Parliament? When did they start televising Parliament? It doesn't matter. In the same Act of Parliament that establishes the mandate referendum, we also commit the country to a decision referendum to be held when the EU negotiation is concluded. So there's David Davis adding his name to Jacob Rees-Mogg's on the list of people in favour of a people's vote once the negotiation is complete. Would you like to hear the rather splendid Lord Adonis duffing up John Redwood on the telly on exactly the same principle? Because I think I've even got the John Redwood thing here. Oh yes, the day after David Davis called for a second referendum when the EU negotiation is concluded, John Redwood agreed. Had he forgotten about this, or was he just hoping that everybody else had when Andrew Adonis reminded him?
Well, I'm very, very happy to reach out to John, because it turns out, as I was preparing for this interview, that John and I actually profoundly agree. John, before 2016, before we started into this Brexit business, was in favour of what he called a double referendum, which was two referendums, one on the principle and the other on the terms of Brexit. Now, what is abundantly clear now is that the
Is this true?
Yeah,
of course not.
It is
I don't
true,
want to waste time debating this silly bit of history. We all agreed on the Conservative manifesto that we would have a single referendum which would decide whether we left or remain. That's what matters.
Yeah, but John, were you in favour of a double referendum? Were you in favour of one?
We originally proposed allowing people to decide whether they wanted a referendum or not. We then made that decision by a general election,
Yeah,
which is a perfectly good way of doing
you
it.
said there should be a double referendum, didn't you? There should be two referenda. That was your position.
Well, we had a referendum about the idea of asking the question and then a referendum to settle the question. Instead, we did the former by a general election, by offering people a referendum. The Conservative Party was elected on that basis. Parliament voted quite strongly in favour of the referendum.
See, the big problem we've got, Victoria...
we decided to let the people decide, which was the right thing to do.
The big problem we have on this, Victoria, is we can't get straight answers to straight questions, including from Boris.
He's got that right. This is John Redwood writing on November the 20th, 2012. The second referendum would follow once the negotiations were complete. Oh, go on, play the Jacob Rees-Mogg again as well.
You could have two referendums, and as it happens, it may be more sense to have the second referendum after the renegotiation is completed.
So that's Jacob Rees-Mogg. This is David Davis. In the same Act of Parliament that establishes the mandate referendum, we also commit the country to a decision referendum to be held when the EU negotiation is concluded. And the following day, John Redwood wrote, the second referendum would follow once the negotiations were complete. That's three in a row. Unbelievable, except not remotely.